I am Carli. I worked with Smart now over 10 years ago when I was in college in New York, and it's always been near and dear to my heart since. I now live in California. I'm a physician out here. I'm training in general surgery and also dabbling in culinary medicine. So this is a perfect opportunity to reconnect with you all. I wanted to share some healthy snacks that I like making on a busy schedule. They're very light, fresh, easy to prepare, and have just lots of vegetables in them and herbs. So very, very healthy. So we're going to do a guacamole and then a pico de gallo with some corn chips, of course, and then also a basil lemonade, frozen basil lemonade. So I'm going to walk you through the ingredients first. And one of the nice things about the guacamole and the pico de gallo is that they use some of the same ingredients. So you certainly don't have to make them together, but if you're looking to make more than one thing for like a family get together or friends or something, it's a nice combo because you're going to be buying many of the same ingredients anyway. So the first is tomatoes. You can use plum tomatoes or Roma tomatoes. We're not quite in tomato season yet, but it is coming up in the summer, and it's actually my favorite time of year. It's one of my favorite produce items. So you'll dice those, and you'll be using those in both recipes. You'll also need some onion. So you can use either white or yellow onion is fine. That's what I'll be using for the guacamole. And you could use red onion. So I'll use that for the pico de gallo just to add a little bit more color. But whatever onion you have is fine for both of these recipes. You'll also need, of course, avocados. So I'll show you the safe way to de-pit an avocado in a moment here. You'll need some jalapeno. So I had one that had actually turned red in my garden. So that's why there's a mix of red and green in here. If you like spicy, I recommend leaving some of the seeds in. If you're somebody that wants to add the flavor, but you like it to be a bit more mild, then take the seeds out. Some minced garlic, and then some limes, salt and pepper, and then lastly, cilantro. All right. So the first thing I want to show you, and some of this may be a review, but is the safe way to hold a knife. So this is a chef's knife. So you hold it kind of in the palm of your hand here and you pinch, and I'll show you both sides. With your thumb and your index finger, you pinch there, and that just gives you some more stability when you're doing the rocking motion of cutting or like an up and down motion. So sometimes the temptation is to put index finger out and you have less stability with that. So really, this is the safe way to hold the knife. So we'll start with avocado. So normally what I do is I kind of slice around the avocado like so. And then one side will, and there's a little brown here, no problem at all. One side will, automatically the seed will come off. The other one will not. So what's the safe way to do this? So you'll see some people kind of like stab the seed, which is fine. You see it comes off on the knife. The thing I really want you to be careful about is not to take it off with your hand. The reason why is because the natural human reflex is to then go back after pulling it off with some force, and then your hand is going back towards the blade. So it's not safe. So actually a safer way to do this is to have something else. And I'm going to use a bench scraper to flick off away from you the seed. If you're going to use half of your avocado and save the other half for later, just go ahead and put it back in your avocado and it'll last longer. Sometimes also storing it with a little bit of citrus can help. Lime and citrus in general kind of act as a natural preservative for food. So it adds that, but it also really brightens the flavor. Mm-hmm. When you think about kind of something that is really satisfying when you eat it, it has all these different elements, right? Like it's a little salty or a little sweet or a little tangy. So it kind of adds that brightness or that tang, a little bit of sour to the recipe. So but then also the preservative piece. If you're preparing for an event or party or just meal prep at home, you can think, what things can I kind of prepare ahead of time and put in the fridge and have it all ready to go, even in one bowl, and then add your avocado last. But if you want it to last after you've prepared it, you should reserve one of the seeds or the pits from the avocado itself and actually put it on top of the guacamole. So you can see it there. You won't obviously eat that or serve it that way, but when you're keeping in your fridge overnight, that will help to keep the green color a bit longer. And then you want to cover it with some cellophane or something. And as opposed to putting the cellophane on the rim, you want to put it down in the bowl, laying right over the avocado, because that keeps air out. And the air is what's going to be oxidizing the avocado and what will turn it brown. So again, what we're going to do is, we don't really care about how this avocado looks because we're going to mash it anyway. So we can peel this out with a spoon, kind of scoop it out like ice cream. And I'm just putting this all into a like medium-sized mixing bowl, and I'll show you that in a moment. And I wanted to keep the avocado fresh for you guys, so this is something I'm going to need to do now, and I didn't prepare in advance. This one's really nice. So one thing, just while I'm doing this, one thing that I love about avocado is it is so creamy. And so it really gives our taste buds and our body that sense of we're eating something that's creamy and fatty, but the fats are healthy for us. So when you're trying to sub out maybe like some other high fat foods in your diet, this is a really good thing to use that adds kind of that mouthfeel of something that's creamy, but also the satisfaction of something that has some fat, because our body does need fat. And the bench scraper, if you don't already have a bench scraper, I highly recommend this tool. It only costs a couple of dollars, so it's a pretty economical purchase. And it's just really useful. So for example, if I had something on my cutting board and I wanted to pick it up, rather than using my knife to pick it up, that kind of dulls the knife and you need to sharpen your knife more frequently. You can use the bench scrape and help move things. I wouldn't do it for this, but just as an example, like if you had diced onion or something, you can use that. So highly recommend that as a tool to make your cooking lives a little bit easier. So I have all the avocado in here. I'm just going to take a fork and mash everything up. And you really get to make the decision here of if you want your guacamole to be chunky, if you want it to be smoother, you get to decide. All right. Okay, so I ended up using about 3 avocados. You can use whatever you have. That's another thing that I love about these recipes. Some people really do like to have the measurements, and I think that's good, but free yourself of that, because this is a recipe where you don't have to have specific measurements. It will turn out good. It'll taste delicious. And so if you just have like a little piece of onion or a little this or a little that, just go for it. Here's the mashed avocado. I'm going to add some of the tomato. So I have tomato for both recipes in here. I'm going to add probably the equivalent of like 1 to 2 plum tomatoes. So those kind of small oval-like tomatoes. And I'm going to mix that in. I'm also going to add my diced onion. I'm going to use the white or yellow onion for this one. And mix that in. All right. And then probably the equivalent of a 1/2 to 1 jalapeno. And I like to mince this. So basically chop it very fine so that when you're eating it, you don't get a big chunk of jalapeno. It's kind of distributed nicely. When you are chopping this, make sure you wash your hands really well afterwards and don't touch your eyes. I always try to remind myself of that. And even last night when I was preparing for this, I think I got a little bit of jalapeno in my eyes. So if it happens, it's not the end of the world, but it's unpleasant. Some garlic. So probably the equivalent of 1 to 2 cloves of garlic, depends on how much you like garlic. I love it. So I generally double the garlic in most recipes that I make. And then I can show you kind of the progress here, what it's starting to look like. Okay. And then we have to season it. So salt, so probably about the equivalent of half a teaspoon. You can also just do pinches and taste as you go. Big fan of that, just kind of like seasoning to taste. A couple of grinds of fresh black pepper. And then the last thing is our herbs. So I'm always trying to find ways to incorporate fresh herbs into food. They have so many healthful benefits. They similar to spices, they're anti-inflammatory. They're relatively inexpensive to purchase. One thing that can be a frustration is you buy a big bunch and then you're like, I can't use it all, and it goes brown in your fridge. They're living plants, so you can keep them in some water, either on your counter or in your fridge, and they'll last a little bit longer. Or if you find that you get home from the grocery store and they're kind of sad, putting them in some water, they usually do like freshen up. So anyway, I'm doing that with this cilantro. So that's the last thing I'm going to be adding to the guacamole. And again, it's probably ends up being a couple of spoonfuls, like maybe 2 tablespoons full of cilantro, but I'm not measuring it. I'm just saying like, okay, I'm going to take a bunch here. One thing that I recently learned is you don't have to pluck the leaves off of the cilantro. For some herbs, you don't really want the stem in your food because it's bitter. For cilantro, it's actually okay to use the stem. You just want to make sure you're chopping it fine. You don't get a big bite of stem, like something that tastes pretty fibrous when you're eating, but it saves a lot of time and you're actually going to be able to use more of the food. So it's good. So what I do is I just kind of chop off the big part of the stem here. And then these other ones, I just kind of, chop it with the leaves. So I kind of go down the line there and then I gather it all together, and then I'm going to do what's called a pivot chop. So again, pinching your knife here, this other hand goes on top of the blade for safety and stability. And then I'm rotating like this. And that's a good strategy for anything that needs to be finely chopped or minced, or anything that says fine in your recipe. It's a good strategy. And you can kind of gather it again, clean your knife off. All right, and then this is that perfect opportunity for using your bench scraper, as you can kind of gather the stuff, right? Clean your board, toss it in. Super easy. All right, so I'm going to incorporate that. And then the very, very last thing is the lime. And the citrus of the lime is going to help to preserve that beautiful green color. I love this thing. Also pretty inexpensive purchase. If you don't have it, don't fret. It's totally fine to squeeze with your hand. And one way to get some extra juice is to roll the citrus prior to slicing and squeezing it. You'll just get more juice out of the fruit. So anyway, so I'm going to add that. And I'm going to do an equivalent of 1 lime, so 2 halves. And incorporate. There we go. So that's our guacamole. Okay. This next one will be pretty quick because everything is already prepared. So I'm just going to show you what I add in. So this is our pico. So I'm going to do the rest of my tomato. This is probably the equivalent to 2 to 3 tomatoes. You can also do plum or Roma, or vine ripe tomatoes is fine, whatever is at your store. I'm going to do some red onion. Again, white or yellow is also fine. I'm going to use the rest of my jalapeno, probably equivalent to 1 jalapeno. Rest of my garlic, probably 1 to 2 cloves. Again, some lime. Can do half to 1, just see kind of how juicy you want it to be. Start with a half, I think. Some salt, so again, probably about half a teaspoon or to taste. Just grab a spoon and mix that up. And totally your choice. You can also add cilantro to this one if you have it. You could either add it like the leaves, whole leaves, or dice them finely, like I did with the guacamole. Okay, beautifully bright and fresh and super easy to put together. I'm just going to tell you the ingredients that I put in this lemonade because it's delicious and I love basil. So let me walk you over here to the blender. Any sort of blender will work. What I do is I take some lemons. I cut the peel off the outside. I have them and take the seeds out. So this is the equivalent of 3 lemons. I like my lemonade a little more tart. So I actually add on the higher side of the lemons. Some people will do just 1 or 2 lemons. This is for a serving size of probably 3 to 4 people. About 3 cups of water. This is a frosty lemonade, so I'm adding some ice. It makes it a little bit thicker. So about a cup of ice. I have some beautiful basil in my garden right now, so that was the inspiration for this. So I'm going to add half a cup of basil leaves. An alternative that is also very delicious is berries. So if you want to do strawberries or raspberries or blackberries, you can just sub that out for the basil in this. It's delicious. Or if you want to add some mint. And then your sweetener. So you can use cane sugar. I really like agave or honey. So I'm going to be using, it's about 1/8 of a cup for 4 total servings of agave in here. Okay. So I put that all in. I'm going to blend it. Beautiful green color. It's so good. And it's so simple, just a few ingredients. So you have this beautiful green drink. Sometimes I'll, to get fancy, I'll garnish it with like a little bit of fruit or a mint leaf. So yeah, so it's absolutely delicious. And that's all though. You have your kind of healthy summer snacks and drink.